Well, thank you all for being here. My name is Sarjenya Jamboni, and I'm with the FDA's Office of Strategic Programs. And I, along with my colleague Sarah Eggers, will be facilitating this meeting today. So on behalf of all of my FDA colleagues, I'd like to just say thank you so much for being here and welcome you all. And we genuinely appreciate that you're all here today to share your perspectives with us. What I'd like to do is go over the agenda and then just a few housekeeping items, and we'll get started. So we're going to start off this afternoon with some opening presentations from my FDA colleagues. They'll provide an overview of the patient-focused drug development initiative, background on Parkinson's disease and treatment options, and then I'll come back and provide an overview of the discussion format. So we have two topics today that we're going to be covering. Topic one is on the symptoms of Parkinson's and how they impact you on a daily life. And topic two is on patients' perspectives on current approaches to treating Parkinson's. We'll have a panel discussion for each topic, followed by a group discussion for each topic. That will take us to the last half hour of the day, which we reserve for open public comment. Open public comment is a time for anybody in the audience, not just patients or caregivers, but anybody that wants to share some thoughts that are outside of the scope of topic one or topic two, you can sign up for open public comment. We'll take a look at break time and see how many people have signed up and how much time each speaker will have. And then finally, we'll wrap up the day with some closing remarks from FDA. Some housekeeping items. Bathrooms are back out in the lobby. If you go back out into the lobby area and make a right and go all the way down the hallway, you'll see the restrooms there. And you'll also see that we have a kiosk that serves basic sandwiches, drinks, and so forth available for purchase. So please feel free to get up and stretch or get a snack or whatever you need to do. So we just want you to be comfortable here. And before we continue, can I have my FDA colleagues please introduce yourselves?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Ella Thunger. I am Director of the Office of Drug Evaluation 1, and our office oversees the Division of Neurology Products.
I'm Dr. Billy Dunn. I'm the Director of the Division of Neurology Products.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Eric Bastings. I'm the Deputy Director of the Division of Neurology Products.
Hi, I'm Dave Putskalny. I'm the Clinical Team Leader in the Division of Neurology Products.
Hello, I'm Suzanne Goldstein. I'm a Medical Officer on the Division of Neurology Projects team.
Hi, I'm Ken Bergman. I'm a Medical Officer and Clinical Reviewer in Neurology.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Len Kapkala. I'm a Medical Officer in the Division of Neurology Products.
Hi, I'm Teresa Mullen, and I direct the Office of Strategic Programs in the Center for Drugs.
My name is Dr. Peter Como. I'm a medical clinical reviewer in the Center for Devices and Radiologic Health in the Division of Neurological and Physical Medicine Devices.
Good afternoon. I'm Lei Xu. I'm the Medical Officer at the Center for Biologics, Office of Cell, Tissue, and Gene Therapy.
Thank you. And we have some colleagues over here. And Sarah Eggers in the Office of Strategic Programs. Meghana Talasani, same office.
Grant Thompson, same office.
Sujita Vaidya, same office. All right, thank you. And Just two more comments. This meeting is being recorded and transcribed, so we'll have the meeting recording and transcript available on the meeting website within a few weeks after the meeting. And then I know there's several of you that are joining us, that joined us already for the morning portion of the meeting, and you're here again for the afternoon. We thank you for joining us for both. So some of the following presentations may be repetitive to you, but we just wanted to let you know. So on that note, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Billy Dunn for his welcoming remarks.
Hi, how y'all doing? Welcome. For those of you who are here this morning, welcome back. And I see a lot of new faces in the crowd, and we're just about as full as we were this morning, so I'm glad you're here. Welcome to this meeting on patient-focused drug development for Parkinson's disease. As I said, I'm Dr. Billy Dunn. I'm the Director of the Division of Neurology Products in the Office of New Drugs at the FDA. Our division reviews a wide breadth of drugs for neurological diseases, including Parkinson's disease. This meeting is a very important one to us, and as you heard during the introductions, as a testament to that, we have the entirety of our team responsible for reviewing Parkinson's disease here to hear your opinions, to avail themselves of the informative commentary that I know that you will have for us, and to incorporate that into our daily work here as we engage in drug development for Parkinson's with sponsors in this area. All these folks have specialized training and have taken care of Parkinson's disease patients and are keen to hear your input today. We had a great discussion this morning on Huntington's disease. I know we'll have another good discussion this afternoon. Before we move on, I want to reiterate some important points from the morning. Some of them were already done, but I do want to just emphasize, as I said, that patient-focused drug development is very important to us, as illustrated by this meeting. We fully understand that Parkinson's disease is a serious condition, and although we have treatments currently approved to treat Parkinson's disease, which many of you here in the room are going to be familiar with, there's obviously a continuing strong need for development of therapies, particularly for patients with advanced disease or patients who have difficulty managing their condition with currently available therapies. Not to mention the ultimate goal, which is to ultimately find a cure for Parkinson's. That's absolutely what we all are here to do. Dr. Suzanne Goldstein, who introduced herself just a moment ago, will provide a bit more background on Parkinson's disease specifically in a few minutes, much of which may be familiar to you, but it's important to ground the discussion. I do want to point out that it's FDA's responsibility to ensure that the benefits of a drug outweigh its risks. Therefore, what we hear from you today about the different ways your symptoms affect your daily life and what you value in a treatment can help us understand how you view those benefits and risks in relation to treatments for Parkinson's disease. That will directly inform our work when we are faced with a drug which is effective, but which may have certain risks associated with it for Parkinson's disease as we consider the best way to get it out there and write a label for it and inform the population about the best way to use it. It's important to remember that FDA is just one part of the drug development process. This came up this morning. I had some questions after the session that really illustrated that it's not always transparent. A lot of the work that we do is confidential. It's not always transparent to what degree we are involved with companies. We're very involved with companies, but we are not the ones that initiate the clinical trials. Drug companies, often working with researchers or patient communities, are the ones who conduct these trials and eventually submit their drug applications to the FDA for our review. We work closely with them throughout the drug development process, however. That was a question that I faced this morning, and I thought I'd just go ahead and bring it up now because I didn't have time to address it in great detail earlier. But from the discovery phase, when molecules or new antibodies or whatever it might be are being researched in animals or considered kind of theoretically, to the first introduction into humans, to large-scale trials that are intended to demonstrate clear evidence of effectiveness, and right through approval and on to post-marketing surveillance, we're with the drug companies every step of the way. So we're closely engaged, and we're bringing our approach, which I think is a flexible one, an open-minded one, and one which reflects the needs of the community. We're bringing that to the table each and every day we meet with the sponsors who are developing these drugs. I want to thank all the representatives from industry, academia, and others as well who are here as a part of this meeting. For those of you who are here representing the Parkinson's disease community, you may not realize that there are members of industry here who are also eager to hear what you have to say, and I think your comments will be equally valuable for them. I guess that's about it. We had a few more comments this morning, but I think in the interest of time, we'll stop them here. Dr. Teresa Mullen is going to step up and give you a few comments about the broad effort on patient-focused drug development. And again, thank you for being here. We really look forward to your comments today.
Thank you, Billy, and welcome to FDA's campus. And as I said this morning, I just want to say that we're very, very grateful that you're here. And in hindsight, we're grateful that we had the meeting today and not planned it for tomorrow or the next day, given how the road closures, there's signs everywhere in the Washington area about how the roads are going to be closed, and it will probably be even more difficult than usual to get here tomorrow or the day after that. So that was a good move on our part, though we didn't realize it. I'm going to spend a minute to tell you about this Patient-Focused Drug Development Initiative. As you notice on the agenda, it says this is a Parkinson's Disease meeting, a public meeting, as part of this Patient-Focused Drug Development. And as Dr. Dunn observed or reminded us all, you know, FDA and CDER in particular, and CBER and CDRH, the medical product centers, are focused on trying to ensure that the benefits outweigh the risks in the review of products, and even deciding whether or not to allow products to stay on the market. And the clinical context for weighing benefit and risk are quite critical to that weighing and that decision, so that if a disease is quite severe and there are not a lot of good treatments available, it affects our willingness and patients' willingness, as they tell us, to accept risks. And so what we realized is that, you know, we really needed a better way to systematically collect the patient's perspective, because it's a most critical perspective on benefit and risk. The patients are the ones who will be experiencing any benefit that there is to gain from a drug and will experience the harm. And we had no good way to collect that widely across the population affected by a disease. We have very good programs, patient representative programs, that allow us to talk to individuals, but not really do it in the way we're going to do it today, which is to get a broader perspective, a diverse perspective on what it's like to live with the disease, how that disease affects your life, and how well or not the treatments that are currently available are working for you. This provides great insight for FDA in terms of our consulting with companies throughout drug development, for example, from the CDER perspective, which we do. And it allows us to weigh that, take that into consideration when an application comes in for marketing review. So this is one of what we committed to do, 20 meetings over the course of 5 years of the prescription drug user fee fifth authorization. We call it the DUFA 5. We're going to do, it turns out, more than 20, but each is focused on a different disease area and intended to gain that kind of information over the course of the discussion in the meetings. When we started this effort 3 years ago, we, working with the divisions, identified about 40 diseases to ask the public which we should focus on over the 5 years. We got about 4,500 comments on that, so we got even more diseases identified through the public comments. We had to take that in a very difficult task of trying to figure out which we would focus on in this first 5 years. And we say first 5 years because we've learned a lot in the course of doing this effort that we can build on and provide opportunities, in fact, for others to have these meetings as well. So we had 16 diseases identified in the first 3 years, and there you can see the list of all the diseases we will be covering under this initiative over the 5-year period. And today we're having the meetings on Huntington's disease this morning, and now we're going to have the meeting on Parkinson's this afternoon. And each has provided extremely beneficial and insight-providing input to us. Each of these meetings is tailored to the particular issues related to disease, but they also have this common set of questions that try to elicit the patient's and that patient's family and caregivers' perspectives on the disease and the current approaches to treatment. So we start with these questions, and then often we tailor and add additional questions if the review division has identified other questions they want to take this opportunity to put to you and ask you to help us understand better. For example, when we had a meeting on HIV, we asked the patients how they would feel about participating in cure research. Many of them were on treatments that seemed to be working well. Would they be willing to go off those treatments to try a possible cure treatment? And so we asked sometimes about the difficulties of participating in trials and things related to other aspects of development. We've learned a great deal from these meetings. At the end, and after we close the docket, we leave our electronic docket open so that we can get other input that patients may be able to offer us, or people who are unable to be here can send in, and we analyze all that information as well as the transcript that we have from the meeting to develop this report. And you'll see the ones that have been developed already on our website. If you were to Google voice of the patient, you will find your way to this report. I usually find information on FDA's website by Googling myself. And you can take a look at all this stuff we've done in this way, and we'll produce a report like that on Parkinson's when we collect all that information and analyze it as well going forward. These reports are very useful as a reference to reviewers and others in terms of what they contain. They try to really authentically capture what you tell us today in the words that you tell us, so that we really do have it be your voice that we're reflecting in these documents. And we've also found that what we hear in these meetings is prompting us to look at how we can build on what we hear in these meetings to maybe even move toward the development of more systematic tools to collect information like this in clinical trials. So it's been extremely valuable for us, and we're looking forward to engaging and hearing what you want to tell us today. And with that, I'll turn it to Suzanne Goldstein to tell you more about the background on Parkinson's. Welcome, and again, thank you very much for being here today, sharing your time and your thoughts with us. I just want to briefly go over the background of Parkinson's disease, which many of you are sure well aware of. And my remarks don't necessarily reflect those of the FDA. Parkinson's affects approximately 1 million people in the United States, which is about 0.5%. For the population over 80 years old, this prevalence is up to about 10%. On average, people develop the symptoms of Parkinson's disease in their 60s. However, about 10 to 15% of patients develop their symptoms less than age 40, and this we refer to as young onset Parkinson's disease. There's really no specific causative factor that's known. Both genetics and the environment probably play a role. Research has suggested that genetics play a larger role in the young onset Parkinson's disease patients, whereas the environment plays a greater role in the later onset of the symptoms. This is a little bit of a complicated slide, but it's just briefly touch on something that's come up in research more recently, that it's felt that the primary mechanism of neurodegeneration, loss of dopamine cells in Parkinson's disease, is caused by programmed cell death or apoptosis, and both the genetics and the environment play a role in this. There are two main symptom categories that define Parkinson's disease, and classically most people are familiar with the motor symptoms: muscle stiffness, slowness of movement, tremors, specifically a resting tremor, as well as gait and postural instability. Non-motor symptoms, which we are now recognizing much more so, include depression and anxiety, difficulty with memory, which can happen early on, something known as the dysexecutive syndrome, and while in the advanced disease, sometimes as dementia. Difficulty sleeping, falling asleep, staying asleep, abnormal dreaming, also very common in Parkinson's disease, as are hallucinations, which can be from the disease itself or from the treatments. And I just want to touch on the treatments. We have a lot of treatments here, and I'll cover them briefly, that are mainly for the motor symptoms. And levodopa is still the gold standard. It's been around since the 1960s and later reformulated as carbidopa-levodopa, much better tolerated. And it's available in a variety of formulations. Cinemet CR, which is long-acting, Vitari, which is a combination of short and long-acting. More recently, we've approved a gel infusion of carbidopa-levodopa, Duopa, which is directly infused into the gut for more advanced Parkinson's disease. There are other agents like dopamine agonists, which can mimic dopamine in the brain, and there are drugs that can actually slow the breakdown of dopamine, so you increase the amount of dopamine in the brain, have a more sustained benefit, and these are the COMT inhibitors and the MAOB inhibitors. Other agents such as anticholinergics and amantadine can help with the tremor and dyskinesias. In terms of non-motor symptoms, there's nothing that's FDA approved, but we do use, or you have experience with, antidepressants and anxiolytics, as well as neuroleptic drugs for the depression, anxiety, and sleep. We also have found some excellent benefit, and probably some patients here may have had this, with the deep brain stimulation surgery, particularly for motor symptoms of tremor, stiffness, and slowness. Non-pharmacological treatments are probably equally important, particularly early in disease, but all throughout the disease. Physical and occupational therapy are very important as our speech and swallowing for people suffering from issues that. Diet and exercise are extremely important in maintaining functional ability, and counseling, both for the patient, caregiver, family, all very important. And as a clinician, I found that support groups were a great help to my patients because they could learn so much from each other and how to deal with their daily lives. So at FDA, we are very aware, we're keenly aware that there are unmet medical needs still, both motor and non-motor symptoms. And that's why it's so important that we have meetings like this today to hear your thoughts, to help guide us in future research and development of treatments. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Thank you to my FDA colleagues for your remarks. And now what I'd like to do is just provide an overview of the discussion format. So as I mentioned before, we have two topics that we'll be reviewing. Topic 1 is on the symptoms that matter most to you. So in this topic, what we're listening for is what are the most significant symptoms of Parkinson's and how do they impact your daily life? How do they affect your ability to do certain activities or are you unable to do certain activities because of these symptoms? Tell us how your symptoms have changed or evolved over time. And how do they affect your social interactions or your mood? Topic 2 is on current approaches to treating Parkinson's disease. So here we're listening for what is your current treatment regimen? And both prescription therapies and other therapies as Suzanne just mentioned. How well are these treatments treating your significant symptoms? And how do you know that it is or is not working for you? What are the biggest downsides to your treatments? And then finally, we'd like to hear your perspectives on what you look for in an ideal treatment. So first, we'll start with hearing from a panel of patients and caregivers. And I've had the honor and the pleasure of working with our panelists for the last week and a half, and I can tell you they've worked so hard to put their thoughts down. You're all incredibly courageous people to do that and then come here and share those stories with us. So thank you for doing that. Our panel reflects a range of experiences with Parkinson's disease, and each panelist will have roughly 5 minutes to present their remarks. So then what we'll do is we'll broaden the dialogue and we'll invite other patients and caregivers in the audience to build on what they've heard from the panel. Share with us what's similar in your life, but also what's different in how you experience Parkinson's or how your loved one experiences Parkinson's. So periodically we'll ask some questions along the way, and if you're comfortable to do so, please raise your hand and we'll have some microphone runners around the room. They'll come to you and you can provide your thoughts. Please state your name before answering. It just makes it a little bit easier in our transcript. We'll also do some polling questions along the way, and you should all have clickers for patients and caregivers and patient representatives only, please. You should all have the clickers at your table that you'll use to answer the polling questions, and we'll test that out in just a little bit. So the polling questions are not scientific. It's completely voluntary for the patients and patient representatives to respond. And what it does is it just gives us some more understanding of what perspectives are in the room. For those of you on the web, you can also respond via the webcast. So speaking of the web, we have over 200 people joining us on the webcast today, so that's incredible. Thank you so much to all of you joining us on the web. We can't see you, but you're a very, very important part of our meeting, and we'll be checking in with you periodically. We'll summarize some of the themes that we're hearing from on the web, and all of your comments from the web will also be incorporated into our summary report. And then finally, we'll also go to the phone towards the end of each discussion to hear from a few dial-in folks. Next slide. We also have a public docket that will stay open for 2 months after the meeting. And this electronic docket is just a very important part of our meeting. It's anything that you weren't able to either share with us today or additional thoughts that come to mind. Please go to the public docket and continue to submit your written comments. They are extremely important. They are all part of the public record, and we'll go through each and every one of them, and we incorporate those comments into our summary report. Anybody is welcome to comment in the public docket, not just patients and caregivers. We also want to share some additional resources at the FDA that you may already know of. First is FDA Office of Health and Constituent Affairs, and their contact information is here. And then finally, we also have, within the CEDAR Office of Center Director, we have the Professional Affairs and Stakeholder Engagement, or PACE. And some of you, I think, have already interacted with this group. And again, all of this information will be available on our meeting website. These slides and everything will be posted there. Okay, so we'd just like to go over a few ground rules for today. Today is really a day to hear from patients and caregivers. So we encourage you to contribute to the dialogue. We are looking forward to hearing as much as we can from you. On that note, FDA is here to listen along with industry, academia, and other government agencies. We think this meeting is going to be very important to all of you also. We just ask that you stay in listening mode. Our discussion will focus on symptoms and treatments on our topic questions. And we understand that there are many, many aspects to Parkinson's. So what we'll do is anything that's outside the scope of topic 1 or topic 2, again, please sign up for open public comment or submit it to the public docket. Any additional thoughts that come to mind. The views expressed today are personal opinions, and on that note, respect for one another is paramount. And then finally, we're going to be passing out evaluation forms towards the end of the meeting, so let us know how the meeting went for you today, and it really helps us to see what we can improve upon for future meetings. All right, so let's start with our first polling question. So again, if we can have our patients and patient representatives, caregivers. All right, so the first question is, where do you live? A, within the DC metro area, or B, outside of the DC metro area? Yeah, when you press it, it should give you a little bit of a buzz, I think, right? Yeah. And just to avoid double counting, if the patient is already responding, the caregiver doesn't have to, but certainly if you would like to help and provide that input, then the caregiver can submit the response on their behalf. Okay, so it looks like nearly 75% of you are from outside of the DC metro area, so thank you again for making the travel to come here. 25% local neighbors we have here, so great to see you all too. Second question, have you ever been diagnosed as having Parkinson's disease? A for yes, B for no. Okay, so 2/3 of you in the room, roughly, have been diagnosed as having Parkinson's disease, and 36% no. Next question. Are you A, male, or B, female? All right, so almost an even split here. It looks like we have more females in the room, but good to see that we also have a good portion of male perspectives in the room. Okay, age. A, younger than 30, B, 30 to 40, C, 41 to 50, D, 51 to 60, E, 61 to 70, or F, 71 or greater. Okay, so it looks like almost half of you responding are in the 61 to 70 age range, followed by the 51 to 60 age range. And it looks like we have a good mix of most of the age groups, so great to see that. Okay, what is the length of time since your diagnosis? A, less than 5 years ago, B, 5 to 10 years ago, C, 10 to 20 years ago, D, more than 20 years ago, or E, I'm not sure. Okay, so it looks like we have several people that have been diagnosed less than 5 years, and then a large portion of you diagnosed between 5 to 10 years ago, and then 10 to 20 years ago. So again, a good mix, it looks like. Okay, and then on that note, could we see what we're hearing on the web?
Very, very similar results. About 63% diagnosed, an even split between male and female, similar age range, and 80% of people are either 5 to 10 or less than 5 years.
Okay, thank you very much. And now I'd like to turn it over to our panel 1 panelists to talk about their most significant symptoms and daily impacts. So we'll start with Dan.
Hello. Thank you for this opportunity to let the patients talk to the doctors. It's a refreshing change, and we welcome it. I'm fairly typical. I mean, each person is an individual profile of this disease, but I think mine is fairly typical, except for one thing, which is the length of time. I'm 71 years old. I was diagnosed when I was 50. And my neurologist, Steve Rich, said that I was going a little slow and would not rush into major dramatic changes, and he was right. But after about 8 years, I had difficulty walking and balance and freezing, so we upped the Cinemet, and I was taking about Cinemet 25/100 every 2 hours. And I had terrible dyskinesia, so that no one would eat with me because I would knock over all the glasses at the table. And I'm a lawyer, and in the courtroom I would have to take recess and shoot myself with Apicin to continue the cross-examination or argument before the judge. And things were very extremely difficult. And my doctor, Dr. Rich, said, how about a brain implant? And my first reaction was, the last thing I wanted is a doctor messing around with my brain. But I came around and I had the operation in 2005. And it was very successful for me. I had I reduced the amount of Cinemet that I was taking by 50%, and with the help of amantadine, I didn't have any dyskinesia, except a slight bit, but not enough to interfere with any activity. So it was very successful for me, and I run a support group for about 12 years now, 15 years, and we have a lot of experience with PBS, and we found that some people don't do well with PBS at all, and have large psychological problems after, and get very depressed. But I was lucky; I had none of that. Then, as my problems increased, I found that the answer to most of my problems was not with the doctors, unfortunately, and not with the medicine, but with the exercise. Exercise is more important than the pills we take. I think. So I'm in a regimen now. I do about 12 hours to 15 hours of supervised exercise aimed at Parkinson's. Most of them are run by the Parkinson's Foundation for the National Capital Area. They're free and they're excellent. And that has enabled me to be mobile. I have ups and downs, periods of several months of where I can walk without a walker and talk and be understood. And but other times I have downtime, and throughout the whole time I had doing exercises, so that they're not a total panacea. But I have times where I have several months of good on time, and then off time where I can't even stabilize myself with a walker. And the problems I have now that I need to rest medically are the things that DBS won't help, and that is speech, sleep, and freezing and falling. Balance, I'd say. So I would urge you all, because the numbers are dramatic. The number of the people who have Parkinson's, and I think 1 million is a little low. But we've been pushing legislation at PAN to get CEC to do a real survey of who has Parkinson's and who doesn't. So that will show how widespread Parkinson's really is.
Any final thoughts, Dan?
Yeah. Let me say, address the impact of my situation. I can walk with a walker and go to museums. I can fly. I can sit and read. But I'm fearful of falling down and breaking my hip. That's the fear that I think many of us share. Because once you break your hip, recovery is slow and complicated, and you often die. And so it's something that is always in the back of my mind. Am I going to fall? I fall pretty regularly. Last week I was in L.A. I fell and I had to have 5 stitches. And I luckily fell in a way and didn't harm myself permanently. But that's one of the things that you are pleased to address pharmacologically, if I can be so bold, to suggest something such as distinguished power.
Thank you so much, Dan. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Next, we have Carl.
This is Parkinson's under stress.
Carl, would you like for me to read your comments? You had some excellent comments down, or we can come back to you if you'd like.
I'm happy to do it. Actually, 1 second.
Okay, no problem.
Sir, let me reassure you that don't let anything from our end cause you any stress. We're thankful that you're here.
Yes.
We're very eager to hear your comments. Take all the time you need, okay?
I can go on, sir. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Carl Robb. I'm 49 years old. I've had Parkinson's since I was age 17. I was diagnosed 6 years later. I'm an Amazon best-selling author, a blogger, lecturer, and advocate for the and board member of the Parkinson's Disease Network. I would have to say that my slowness of movement I find the tasks take longer, more effort. I have rigidity, range of movement, more flexibility. Has become more difficult. Balance, ease of walking and gait are slowly becoming factors that I find most challenging of all that I encounter. The most frustrating and annoying factors relate to the illness or the sheer unpredictability of when certain symptoms crop up without forewarning. Surprise. These factors can affect all factors of daily living. All factors of daily living. Attempting to summarize the illness is massive and intricate. It's not an easy feat. This illness changes your being, robs you of your identity, forces you to become someone else. Between the disease and the meds, you must determine what symptoms are side effects and the meds and what is truly Parkinson's. At age 30, I made the very difficult decision to give up driving. I didn't want to jeopardize or put others at risk, so I was sure that I could be in better control. Someone at age 30 shouldn't have to face something this difficult. On my best days, I believe that I'm protected, mobile, and the meds are working well, even after 2 decades of nearly the same dosage of meds. On the worst days, I experienced some balance problems, speech, and probably experienced dysphagia as well. I never really can tell when a good day is coming or not. My ability to cope came at such a young age after I made my peace with the illness, except that it must be dealt with, learned from, and creatively worked around. It's trying at times and hard to see this illness slowly creep up on you. I imagine any illness fluctuates over time. So yes, I can vary from moment to moment and day to day. I rarely if ever see two that are alike, but I try to make each a productive day. I'm aware that stress is a major factor in this illness. Diet, I think being a long-time vegetarian has been a benefit. I found that when I eat healthier, more natural food, that it just improves and my whole body seems to function better as well. Yoga has been excellent balance and centering my mind and body. Breaking stomach so much about energy and mindfulness. Sleep is crucial for PD patients. I'm so grateful that I'm able to sleep well. Meditation, stress reduction, massage, and reflexology. I'm trying to learn patience. It's all been helpful. Lastly, exercise can help briefly as well, but it can make balancing meds for the day even more difficult. Stress, anxiety, crowds, and being rushed all contribute to making my symptoms worsen. Let's start like right now. When one loses confidence in one's own body, he knows that his or her body will not respond as well as asked. You wonder, search, seek for options and solutions. It worries me that Our best alternatives are invasive pollution and dangerous drugs with side effects that we don't look at. And we don't look at illness from a more organic and basic approach. This illness affects the mind, body, and spirit. And all three must be kept in balance, but the other two fall as well. I'm worried that there are fewer effective drugs for more patients, and it's a little understood about the aspects of Parkinson's. It worries me to contribute less and less to my family's care and not be able to always help with household chores when I want to. No two Parkinson's patients are exactly alike. My observation of getting a handle on this illness is a mystery. Parkinson's affects all ages at all stages of their lives. Parkinson's disease is an awkward disease on a social level and a physical level. Since my diagnosis, nothing in my life has ever been normal or predictable. Before my diagnosis, I experienced tremors, poor posture, balance issues, mobility problems, dystonia, fascination, bradykinesia, and speech issues. When I began symptoms over 25 years ago, I experienced a remarkable transformation in my condition. I saw my balance, gait, and overall mobility condition improve. Moving forward, I began experiencing dyskinesia. Dyskinesia at one point would last for 2 hours, exhausting hours. Right now, I feel my greatest challenge, the struggle is timing and sustaining the potency of the meds as the pills wear off over the day. One of the hardest challenges throughout the day is the delicate balance mixing meds and food over time. I'm very protein sensitive, even though I eat vegetarian. When traveling or going out, it is never easy to know what to expect with change in schedule. For someone who's had this disease for so long, my dosage of cinnamon equivalent methadone are all still quite low. But my window of off time is slowly creeping up. It has cost me several friendships and given me many friendships, but much of those relationships are out of my control. I've lost friends who just couldn't get their arms around this illness. I accepted trying to understand Parkinson's without living with it on a daily basis is pretty much impossible. Parkinson's disease has brought me an amazing community of close friends who understand what I'm experiencing and are there to support me as I do them. I've practiced regularly for 16 years, with a master for 3, and seen huge improvement over the past 10 years in mental, physical, and spiritual ways. I'm a long-term vegetarian, which has improved my digestion, skin, and overall pill uptake. Plus, I feel better without meat protein. I do moderate exercise with walking, playing the Nintendo Wii until I sweat, write almost every day, and do something creative, create something new every day. My stomach continues to maintain most of the efficacy needed on a good day. For movement and balance, my root group is most of the same methadone they take it to help my balance. To answer question 2, that's about how well your regimen is treating you. That's a tricky question because I've had this so long. I don't know. I think that I'm doing well for as long as I have lived. So far well enough. But I wouldn't mind seeing more question 2A. So far well enough. I wouldn't mind more help. Most of my friends and readers need a lot more help. I'm especially worried about my care partner as I increase her workload over time. Of course, side effects like dyskinesia and on-off effects are probably the worst of the batch of my symptoms. I see the insurance companies tell me which drugs are maintenance and which those are not. I don't think it should be up to them to tell me which are significant and those that are not. We need our meds if we need our meds. I don't know what a cure would mean, whether that means halting the illness or reversing it. But in my mind, the perfect treatment would be a once-a-day pill, patch, or inhalant that controls all symptoms minus side effects and without on-off at times. I'm a realist, but it is fun to dream. I'm hopeful for the future developments in therapies as well as drugs. Our community is in dire need of assistance in slowing, stopping, and even reversing the steep of the disease. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carl. Next, we have Todd.
TD for me is pathos defiant. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Todd Head. I am 63 years old. I have Parkinson's disease. I was diagnosed in November 2008. In the 7 years since, I have listened to brilliant doctors, read stories about PD by celebrated people, participated in clinical research, joined the foundation, the Parkinson's Disease Foundation, as an advocate, and I helped form a nonprofit organization to raise money for PWP services. I'm here today to share my experience with PD and specifically my symptoms as my disease has progressed. Parkinson's disease is insidious. Motor deficits are deceptively routine in the scheme of old aging, stiffness, slowing, shaking, and loss of balance. But finding these symptoms in patients in their 30s and 40s and 50s, decades before seniority, is unusual and frightening. Upon these challenges, Parkinson's disease often affects cognition, memory, executive function, and autonomic systems in the human body. 2 years before I was diagnosed with PD, I was having difficulty walking and controlling my forward momentum. I was carrying one end of a cabinet to install and could not stop. My orthopedic surgeon recommended I see a neurologist. I was first tested with the Hone and Yar rating scale, performing with ease the simple motor coordination and reflex evaluations. I felt reassured that I was not suffering a brain disorder. The neurologist then asked a question that jolted me to attention, because I had not mentioned this annoyance to anyone. He asked if my handwriting had become smaller. I nearly laughed at his precise deduction. Yes, my handwriting had become Lilliputian. It would start out relatively normal, but by the sentence end it was an illegible scrawl. I had micrographia, judgment PD. Another early symptom was emotional sensitivity. Usually when I was alone, that would bring about without warning, episodes of tearful weeping linked to worry and anxiety about family, as well as emotional welling associated with joy and gratitude. I cried often at movies and with music in the car, any place where emotions were out. I considered the possibility that I was evolving and maturing. I never thought of this as pathological. Shortly after my diagnosis, I learned of emotional incontinence, a symptom not uncommon with Parkinson's disease. During the last 7 years, I've experienced a slow but gradual worsening of motor symptoms. The most difficult of these is freezing, the sudden inability to move my legs, as if they were set in blocks of hardened concrete. This occurs most often when I'm at home, in hallways and close quarters, usually coming off my levodopa. Often this occurs when I'm trying to hurry out to an appointment, and I'm severely affected when standing in large crowds. This condition presents the greatest risk of falling. Sleep dysfunction, including daytime sleepiness, contributes to impaired thinking, slow reaction time, and fatigue. I've not had restorative sleep in many years. Initially, restless leg caused an aching in my calves, which took hours to walk off. So medications help, but then cause sleep attacks, which are moments when my conscious mind is switched off. I sort of go blind. This has happened during casual conversations while watching TV. And you can imagine it's terrifying for driving a car or operating machinery. Adding to sleep problems, I've sometimes had vivid dreams, and I act these out occasionally, which contributes to my temperament. Slowness or bradykinesia is my condition most of the time. It is not just a physical change in movement velocity, but a pervasive slowing of thought patterns, like a freezing of synapses. One way that I encounter this condition is by using a positive intention that requires a clear and undivided purpose. And that's how I carry on. Thank you, and my name is Todd.
Thank you so much, Todd. Next, we have Rosa.
Hi, I'd like to thank FDA for giving me opportunity to tell my experience. My name is Rosa Kim. I'm research advocate with the Parkinson's Disease Foundation and coordinator of support group for Korean Americans with Parkinson's disease in Chicago area. I'm here on behalf of my mother, who suffered from Parkinson's disease for 6 years and passed away 3 years ago. My mother, a school teacher, was strong-willed and a most loving and caring person. She was diagnosed Parkinson's at age 81. Like most people, she had symptoms such as insomnia, lost smells, constipation, anxiety, and fear long before her diagnosis. However, her first major symptoms were stiffness and the inability to move. Mom raised the four of us by herself, and she was a very independent woman. Therefore, when she could no longer walk or move, she felt powerless. She felt like her humanity was taken away and became very depressed. Soon after, she developed speech problems and difficulty finding words, which made her even more withdrawn. Her degeneration was much faster than most of Parkinson's disease patients. Around age 84, she became wheelchair-bound, and her mild dementia started. Eventually, she lost ability to do daily activities like dressing, bathing, feed by herself, and go out for a walk. After that, the non-motor symptoms got worse as well. She was very embarrassed about her symptoms, and we often had to cancel plans because of constipation, diarrhea, or stomach pain. On good days, she was very responsive and tried to help herself, do little things like holding a cup while she's drinking or trying to use chopsticks to eat. Doing exercise and getting out of the house helped her with flexibility and mood. She had bad days when she was around with lots of people with noises, like parties and even family gatherings. When she seemed stressed, the medication didn't seem work well, and her mind will be so distant and blank. Also, if she woke up from a long nap, it would take her some time to realize where she is and who she is. Talking through it with her often helped. One example how we could tell her cognitive condition from day to day is when I call her, "Mom," if she answers yes, then I know her mind is somewhat clear. But when she answers, "Yes, ma'am," or smile and don't answer, then I know she doesn't know who I am. So then we will have conversation based on that situation. My mother spoke Korean and Japanese and limited English. After a couple of years, as her disease progressed, she would answer us in Japanese, which we do not speak. And she would ask questions in Korean to her friend who only speaks Japanese. She sometimes started her sentence in Korean and ended in English. Other bad days, she had body aches. Although we didn't know where the body aches were, we could tell her by moaning out loud when we moved her. We discussed with this doctor and we added pain medication before bathing or moving activities to alleviate her pain. My mother's greatest fear was losing her independence, become dependent on her children, and losing the respect of her peers. Unfortunately, my mother had to realize and live through many of these fears. I hope the FDA can use us in Parkinson's disease support groups and Parkinson's foundations as a resource for developing better medicine in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosa. And finally, we have Becky. Hi, my name is Becky Hood, and I'm from Princeton, Massachusetts. I'm 33 years old, and I've been living with Parkinson's disease for 10 years. My initial symptoms appeared when I was 23. I went to numerous doctors in Massachusetts, all of who dismissed my symptoms and my fears, stating that I was far too young to have Parkinson's, especially given that I had no family history of it. A year later, I moved south to attend Duke Law School. It was there that I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at the age of 24, 1 month after beginning law school and a long way from home. Thank you. By the time I was 30 years old, the disease had progressed to the extent that deep brain stimulation, or DBS, was necessary. The three most significant symptoms that I deal with are difficulty moving, dyskinesia, and cognitive difficulties. Difficulty moving is one of the most crippling symptoms that I have. When I was initially diagnosed, difficulty moving meant that my left hand moved slower than my right, and I walked with a slight limp. Since my diagnosis 9 years ago, difficulty moving has increased exponentially and now includes problems walking, eating, showering, turning over in and getting out of bed, and at times not being able to stand up without assistance. I often have to get dressed while lying on the floor. Using the restroom is difficult, both because my stomach muscles are often too cramped to actually go to the bathroom, and also because I have so much difficulty both standing up and pulling up my pants. I also suffer from dystonia, where my entire upper body goes stiff, leading to a severe back pain and neck pain and headaches. My mouth is often forced open in a painful position, or my mouth is forced closed with my tongue stuck out. As for dyskinesia, I am very sensitive to Parkinson's medications, and as a result, I have extreme reactions to even tiny amounts of medication. On some days, I just look like I've had too much sugar, but at times my dyskinesia is so severe that it looks like I'm having a seizure. It's very painful. Before undergoing DBS, I was expending so many calories that I lost 15 pounds and I was down to a weight of only 88 pounds. On a positive note, having so much dyskinesia means I can always fully justify eating a lot of ice cream and an extra helping of dessert. When I'm dyskinetic, my left foot turns in, causing me to walk on the outside of my foot. The dyskinesia can cause me to slam the side of my foot against the ground. As a result, not only have I lost the ability to wear high heels, which is something that I mourn deeply, I have also fractured my foot on several occasions. Cognitive difficulties have been especially hard for me to deal with, as I recently had to leave my job as a corporate attorney, a position I held for the past 5 years and loved. When I am off, I have difficulty understanding simple questions, and it feels like I'm in a fog. My concentration and ability to multitask are greatly affected. I often go from task to task without ever actually completing anything. As a result of these cognitive difficulties, I suffer from anxiety whenever I need to complete a particular task. In preparation for this panel, we were also asked how our lives were affected by Parkinson's. At the risk of sounding overly dramatic, every aspect of my life is affected by this disease. My life revolves around my medication schedule. I take Cinnamit every 1 hour and 7 minutes. In addition to Cinnamit, I take 14 other types of Parkinson's or related medication throughout the day, including 15 pills just at nighttime. My symptoms change frequently and unpredictably. Not knowing how I'm going to react to each dose of medication I take, as well as the uncertainty of the length and severity of the various off-and-on states, is what makes this disease so hard to live with. Because of this, I find myself confined to the house on many days. I have to push myself to make plans with friends, and when I do so, I often cancel at the last minute because I get so anxious going out. Leaving the house often triggers a panic attack where my whole body freezes and it becomes difficult to breathe. My ability to cope with these symptoms has definitely declined over time. I used to be so hopeful that the DBS would alleviate most of the symptoms, and while it has had some success with decreasing the dyskinesia, the severity and frequency of my off times have continued to increase. As bad as the dyskinesia was, I find the off times to be even more debilitating, as then I have to rely on others for help with basic tasks such as dressing. My biggest concern is not being able to forecast what the progression of my disease will be. It is incredibly scary not knowing how fast and to what extent my disease will progress. I fear that the people I love most in the world will have to take care of me. My family has all been there for me through everything, and I do not want them to have to worry about my care in the future. I'm engaged to be married, and my fiancé has stood by me through brain surgery and through all of my ups and downs, and I want to be there with him to build a family and a happy life together. With that said, I will continue to draw my hope and strength from my family, the advocates in this room, and the researchers around the globe who are studying Parkinson's.
And I know that one day, together, we will find a cure.
Thank you so much, Becky. Can we please give our panelists a round of applause? That was I mentioned this earlier, but it takes an extraordinary amount of courage for coming here and sharing your stories with us, so thank you so much for doing that. And what I'd like to do now is ask you, for other patients and caregivers in the audience, what you heard from the panel. Do those experiences resonate with you also? You can raise your hand or nod your head. Does that sound similar to your experiences? Yeah? Okay. And on that note, I'd like to ask two other questions. So Todd, you brought up the micrographia, and I was wondering if others in the audience also, was that something that you've experienced? So several hands raised for that. And then Carl and Becky touched upon just the unpredictability of the Parkinson's, and was that something also that you experienced living with that unpredictability? Okay, so a lot of head nods, so thank you for sharing that. Okay, so what we'd like to do now is a polling question, so if you could get your clicker out. Okay? All right, so of all the symptoms that you have experienced because of Parkinson's disease, which do you consider to have the most significant impact on your daily life? And you can choose up to 3. A, motor symptoms such as slowed movement or tremor. B, impaired balance and coordination. C, constipation. D, sleep issues such as falling asleep, staying asleep, or abnormal dreams. E, cognitive impairment such as difficulty concentrating or difficulty with complex tasks. F, fatigue and loss of energy. G, difficulty swallowing or drooling. H, depression or anxiety, or I, other symptoms not mentioned. Okay, so it looks like the majority of you who responded identified A, motor symptoms, as one of the most significant symptoms that you're living with, followed by impaired balance and coordination and sleep issues. And then it looks like we have the other symptoms also highlighted here. In addition to several people chose other symptoms not mentioned, so we'll be sure to touch upon that in a little while also. How about on the web?
We had 55% say motor symptoms, 55% also say fatigue and loss. 36% say cognitive impairment, 40% sleep issues, and 40% impaired balance. And all the rest are 20 or below.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now I'd like to invite other patients and caregivers in the audience, and certainly panelists, please also share your thoughts too. Would somebody like to start us off with how you or your loved one experiences the motor symptoms and how that impacts your life? Thank you. My motor symptoms and all my other symptoms are the same as my brothers and sisters here with Parkinson's. In some of them I see my past, and some of them I see my future. And that's the reason why I'm here. I don't want to be, I'm supposed to be the caregiver of my children. My children are at the point that they're only teenagers and they're beginning to help. I want that. That's not the right way to be a parent. I wish that situation can change. I don't know how to change it. That's why I'm here. As for the current medications, there are no medications. There are only symptoms. The current things that we have available, and we're running out of options, are like an aspirin to a migraine. The Unmet and DBS, they all stop working. We don't need to look any further. And with all due respect, we're doing as patients all we can right here today, and all the patients that are present on the internet, and all the others that could not travel to be here because of mobility reasons. So we're here to ask the FDA. What else can you do for us? We're here to do whatever we can. We're here to participate in trials. We're here to advocate. We're here to step up and raise our hands. We speak about our experiences. Our experiences are all the same. We're all our past, our present, and our future. But we need more than a medication that was found in 1967. Also, many resources have been spent on so many other things. Man has been to the moon, and how many of us are going to go to the moon? So we want a medication, something better that's other than 1967. I was born in 1964, and I'm still waiting for something. So please help us. Thank you so much. And your name? My name is Claudia Garrido Revilla. Thank you so much. Thank you. Would anybody else like to share? Yes, we have a comment back there. Hi, my name is Kim McCleary, and I'm here in two roles, one on behalf of my mother, Karen Burke, who is 72 and has lived with Parkinson's for 25 years. And what struck me, I took some notes from her on Sunday about how she would answer some of these questions. And the motor symptoms is such a big basket of issues in Parkinson's. You've got rigidity and dyskinesia, freezing, tremor, all of these things that are kind of wrapped up in the idea of motor symptoms that I think would be more varied among the people here in the room and probably on the web to describe, you know, what their most problematic things are. And certainly over the course of her 25-year experience, it has shifted, as the woman who just spoke was saying, that some are in the past and some are in the future, but maybe we could delve a little more into that particular issue. Thank you, Kim. We have one more comment here.
Yes, my name is Kevin Kwok. One of my concerns is the actual diagnosis and definition of our disease here. If we look towards using motor symptoms, which is the primary marker of disease, generally by the time we're diagnosed, it's far too late because many of the other symptoms have progressed so far. And so what my concern is, or urging to researchers and to the patient community, is to talk about this myriad of symptoms collectively and use measurement tools that actually take all of them into consideration, not just motor symptoms as your first primary diagnosis. Because I think by then we're actually missing the chance to actually help many, many people. So thank you very much. Thank you, Kevin.
So that's a good point. Let's expand upon this. I'd like to invite those of you who want to respond to give us your experiences with any of these issues, really. Is there a symptom here that is most bothersome to you, and why is it most bothersome to you?
Hi, my name is Nancy Olson. I'm here as a patient. I don't look like a patient yet, but I am. And I'd like to challenge the FDA to think about bringing together traditional medicine with Eastern medicine. Because when I started with my symptoms that were very, very slight, I'm just one of those people that's very in tune with my body, and I knew something was off. I went to doctor after doctor after doctor, and for years, and nobody could tell me what was wrong. I finally went to the Myrna Brin Center for Integrative Medicine at Thomas Jefferson University Hospital in Philadelphia, where they discovered I had an extreme overgrowth of a bacteria that's present in your intestinal tract, but that doesn't belong there in large quantities. And I had so much of it that it had killed the good bacteria. So recently there's been some news on the Parkinson's front to suggest that perhaps Parkinson's starts in the gut. It was before my diagnosis with Parkinson's that I was treating with the Myrna Brin Center when they discovered this overgrowth of bacteria. And once they got that under control, I felt a lot better. it didn't prevent me from having Parkinson's, which I was later diagnosed with, because I knew that something was still wrong with the motor symptoms and the olfactory, decline and so forth. So I pretty much diagnosed myself by the time I got the clinical diagnosis. But I think there's a lot of merit to some of the things that are being done on the eastern side of medicine together with the western side. So I would challenge the FDA and I'm a retiree of the pharmaceutical industry, worked in the industry for 45 years. I would challenge the industry and the government to bring those two thoughts and schools of medicine together, because in my experience, that was the magic bullet for me to get to my diagnosis early. And by getting to my diagnosis early, I've been able to keep my symptoms under control with no medication, simply through exercise and diet. You may have noticed me getting up earlier and going up against the wall. The stiffness was overwhelming me, and I just don't let it do that. When I need to move, I move, whether I'm in church or at the FDA or in bed. My husband says, I won't tell you what he says, but I get up and down at night more than the average person, and I walk around the house, and I look out the window, and then my legs are not hurting anymore, and then I go back to sleep. So I think there's value in those two schools of medicine putting their heads together, which I think is kind of a trend anyway in the medical field today in many arenas. So it's been very helpful to me, and I would just raise that as a flag and say, don't forget about that piece.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that thought. Thank you. Yes, let's go here, gentlemen.
I'm Elliot Tostow, and I've had Parkinson's for 7 years. And it seems to me that from my experience, one of the most underrated symptoms, one that bothers me a lot, is the constipation diarrhea symptom. And that is probably not spoken about as much as others because of societal reasons and personal control over one's topics. But not only is it important in and of itself in its activity limitations, it is important in that it affects the rate of absorption of the L-DOPA drugs that you're taking. And it seems to me that we've made very little, if any, progress in that area over the past 20 years.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask, I know that we heard some of you mention that, stress or maybe not getting enough sleep can trigger some of your symptoms. Would somebody like to comment on additional triggers or how your symptoms change day to day? Yes.
Do I have a microphone? My name is Alice Lazzarini. I've been a patient with Parkinson's for about 11 years now. I'm here in part representing the American Parkinsons Disease Association, but also on my own personal experience. In retrospect, I think even before 11 years, my first presenting symptom was fatigue. And I would just call to the FDA's attention something that came up in this morning's discussion with the Huntingtons as well, which is writing off-label or repurposing a drug. I recently had trouble getting refill for a drug I've been taking for 9 years for narcolepsy, it's indicated for narcolepsy, not for Parkinson's disease, but it's already been through the safety rigmarole of being FDA approved, and I was amazed actually that because it's not indicated for Parkinson's disease, my neurologist had to jump through hoops after hoop after hoop to prove, in fact, that there's documented evidence that fatigue is a difficulty with Parkinson's disease, and it took me 2 months to get this medication. So consider at least some things that are being repurposed or off-label would be important to bring to the fore.
Thank you so much. Looks like we have a comment back here. Could you go?
I am Chuck Linderman from Alexandria, and I want to address the other symptoms up there that you don't have any nomenclature for them. How would you like to walk around with this contraption on? Because the FDA has done nothing and there is nothing in the medical community to help those of us who have head drop associated with Parkinson's. And I can assure you, without this, my chin would be on my chest. And that is not something that one wants to have to live with for the rest of their life. And I find that this is an area in which the only alternative that's been suggested to me has been surgery and an 8-hour procedure at Johns Hopkins University Hospital that would take a year to recover from, because they would fuse both the front and the back of the neck and put titanium plates, rods, and screws in my neck. And we've chosen not to do that. But I want to focus the FDA not just on that portion of this, but to focus as well on what Dan Lewis started out in his first comments about exercise. Because over 10 years ago, I made a decision when I was first diagnosed that I was going to fight this thing with a personal trainer, and I have done so pretty effectively, and still compete in an all-adaptive rowing regatta that takes place every year in Philadelphia.
Thank you so much, sir. And your name? Oh, Charlie. Okay, thank you, Charlie. Could I check in with the web and see if there's any comments coming in? Okay. Okay, great. So let's take some more comments then. Any of you like to comment? So we've heard some mention on the fatigue, constipation, motor symptoms. Other symptoms that you'd like to share with us? Yes. Dan?
I think I neglected to address the cognitive issues, which are very important. I suffer from very broad memory loss. And, for example, if you asked me, I couldn't tell you what I had for breakfast. And I forget things, and it's very disruptive to a normal life. Because you never, I've lost my short-term memory, and I can't recall names or places or proper nouns. The other thing I'd like to say is stress is a killer. It really worsens all my symptoms, and a lot of people I know through my work with Parkinson's Foundation has the same problem. They get involved in responsibilities, and then their symptoms get worse. And so the responsibility of raising enough money to keep the foundation open drove me to quit as chairman of the board, because I just feel it was harming me and causing me to fall down, and other symptoms were accentuated.
Thank you very much, Dan. Carl?
I wanted to reiterate that I think 60% of Parkinson's is stress. But I'm very fortunate that I don't suffer from depression, but depression seems very common in Parkinson's, and that's something that needs to be addressed.
Thank you very much, Carl. Let's hear from... Is this all set? Okay. Hi, I'm Sally from Patients Like Me, Sally Oken. I wanted to just report a symptom that we haven't heard about that our patients do report on. About 32% are reporting moderate to severe sexual dysfunction. And again, that might be a sensitive topic that in real encounters with physicians and things might not come up. But in our community, oftentimes those types of comments are actually welcome and encouraged to be talked about. So I think the number's high enough for us to be thinking about that as an issue. Also, the relationship, the impact on relationships is also related to that as well. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sally. What I'd like to do now is go over to the phone. We do have two two participants joining us on the phone today, and they were identified as panelists, but they couldn't make it here today. So we want to make sure we give them just a few minutes each to present their thoughts. So we should have Chuck and Judy on the phone, and operator, it looks like we're going to start with Chuck. So Chuck, are you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes. Chuck, we can hear you.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings from the North Georgia Mountains. My name is Chuck Esposito, and I first reported my symptoms to my PCP in the summer of 2004. And like many Parkinsonians, I was originally misdiagnosed. It was not until 2 years later that I was properly diagnosed with idiopathic PD. We Parkinsonians are different as snowflakes. Although there are many similarities about them, no two of us are exactly alike. In my case, the three most bothersome symptoms are fatigue, EDS, which is excessive daytime somnolence, and LID, which is levodopa-induced dyskinesia. As some of you recognize, the medications used to treat the PD are more responsible for these disturbances than the disease itself. Despite these different symptoms, they can affect different activities, and they can vary not only from day to day, but from hour to hour. Panel participants found this at the beginning. For example, on a bad day when I'm suffering from fatigue, EDS, LID, tremor, bradykinesia, rigidity, dyspnea, which is difficulty breathing, postural instability, etc. I'm pretty miserable, and I'm not interested in moving very far from my recliner, especially if I'm experiencing destination and freezing. The word destination comes from the Latin word meaning to hurry, which describes the quickening and shortening of a normal stride, which can appear as a hopping or shuffling gait. Freezing was mentioned earlier by participant Todd. This is something different altogether. It's experienced by a lot of third of us. It's the sensation of suddenly becoming stuck to the floor and temporarily unable to walk. This is a potentially serious problem because it increases the risk of falling forward, which increases the risk of ending up in a hospital bed with a broken hip, which increases the risk of getting pneumonia, which increases the risk of dying, as was mentioned by Dan. In such circumstances, the proximal cause of death is generally regarded as pneumonia, but the distal cause is in fact PD. On a good day, when most of these symptoms are absent or minimized, I can engage in a fair number of activities and perform actions. At the same time, there are some activities, for example, motorcycling, which will forever remain on the I do not do that anymore list. PD is a progressive disease, and Lord knows let me explain that to us. That means that the original symptoms worsen as time goes by, and also symptoms which were not originally apparent begin to emerge. The good news, in my view, and I know not everyone shares this view, is that the progression is generally slow. The slow progression allows time for both the Parkinsonian and the care partner to acclimate to the inevitable, relentless deterioration. My closest family members are a day's drive from here, and as my PD progresses, my endurance declines, fatigue increases, and it reduces how far I can drive a day. So I just don't get together with family or visit friends as much as I used to, or as much as I'd like to. And in closing, I'd like to say I appreciate the invitation to participate in this patient-focused drug development meeting, and I thank you for your attention. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Chuck. I'm not sure if you could see, but several people were nodding their heads as you were speaking, so it sounds like what you said resonated with several people in the room. Okay, next we should have Judy. Judy, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Judy Wheaton. I'm 65, and I was diagnosed 2 years ago with Parkinson's. I currently live in Arkansas, have retired in Arkansas, was a researcher at a college in Texas. I'd like to address 3 symptoms that significantly impact me on a daily basis. The first one constipation, and I'm not talking occasional constipation, but I'm talking constant, chronic, everyday constipation. It's more than just discomfort. It's homebound to me several days each week just to address the issue with medication and the after effects. I'm currently taking anesthesia twice a day in order to digest the food and pass away. I also have to watch my diet. I believe it was Carl, one of the panelists, that mentioned that he watches his diet. I think he said he was a vegetarian. I have to really watch meat, especially maybe because it's harder to digest, that it will take me several days to digest and cause constipation even with the med. The second symptom is not sleeping, and I've heard several people talk about this. Currently, my doctor prescribed a medication, Indian, that warned me that insurance companies will not refill this medication on a monthly basis because it's habit forming. My insurance allows for 90 days of this medication per year, so that kind of leads me to cut the tablets in half and not take one every night. And you might be thinking, why don't I take a different medication? Why make me refill monthly? But unfortunately, I also take Rismol for a heart disorder, and many of the sleep aids interact with this medication. Not sleeping at night leads me to the third symptom, and I haven't heard it mentioned yet, but it's inflammation. Currently, I have tremors in the right side of my body only, and they're controlled fairly well during the day with the Parkinson's med. I take the carbidopa-levodopa. I take 3 tablets a day of between 5 and 100. But when I don't sleep, my right arm tremors all night. Well, after 2 or 3 nights of this, it feels like my arm and my shoulder have been severely overused. And I begin to get pockets of inflammation in my arm and up in my shoulder. Last year, I just developed an infection in the bursa of my elbow from several nights not sleeping and the constant movement in the arm and the inflammation in the neck. Sleeping at night really seems to aid in this entire inflammation problem that I experience. Thank you for letting me share just a little bit of my Parkinson's story, and I appreciate listening to all of yours.
Thank you so much, Judy. And again, I saw heads nodding when she was speaking also. So on that note, she brought up inflammation, that not sleeping increases the inflammation that she feels. Do others feel the same way? Does that resonate with others? Okay, the tremor, she mentioned that not sleeping also increases the tremor. Okay. FDA panel, do any of you have any questions that you'd like to ask?
I don't have a specific question. I want to not only thank folks, but reassure folks that a lot of what you're saying, it's familiar to us. We hear you. It's good to hear the reiteration that things that we're aware of, particularly some of the uncommon things or things that you may be concerned we are not attentive to. I want to reassure you that it's not the first time we're hearing much of this. And so that's good news, I think, because some of these things are very difficult to detect. They're concerning. They're hard to talk about. It's a whole wide variety of them. But I know I speak for the team because we talk about these things. These are very important Parkinsonian symptoms, and we do pay a lot of attention to these in our work with sponsors. So I thought I would just offer that up as a bit of what I consider to be good news, that we're all together collaboratively on the right track and trying to not just pay attention to the standout symptoms, but to the whole plethora of symptoms that can occur in this disease.
Thank you, Billy. Okay, so let's get back to our discussion here for a few more minutes. Anything else that you'd like to share on how you're experiencing these symptoms? Yes?
I'm Paul Cannon, I'm a patient. One of the things you asked in the questions but didn't address in here is social withdrawal. I think like many of these symptoms is actually insidious and probably has more of an effect than we realize, especially on the caregiver in that context. So things like social withdrawal and sleep can actually be insidious. They don't seem so bad themselves necessarily, but I think they make a lot of other things worse.
Social withdrawal. Okay. Thank you. Yes, let's see. Okay, it looks like the microphone right there.
I'm Angela Robb. I'm Carl's wife, and but I'm not only speaking as his caregiver. So some of the things I'm about to say are actually experience I had as a support group leader and a speaker on care partner issues. I think there's a lot that isn't said about the non-motor symptoms, particularly the problems with executive dysfunction, or I can't remember what the word was, but there's a lot of things that I think affect caregivers in the workplace that people with Parkinson's, being able to go through step by step. If it's a 10-step task and they get lost in about 2 or 3, and then they start over, and then they get lost again, and then they have to go back again, and then they never complete the task, or they start a project and can never finish a project. Also with that goes with what Becky said about the anxiety. So, you get to step 4 and you can't remember, and you go back and you keep going and going, and then on top of that, the stress associated from your in the workplace or even in a family situation with that. A lot of people who, if you aren't immediate family and living with a person with Parkinson's, you won't understand that the cognitive dysfunction or executive dysfunction is a huge impact. People think you're doing it on purpose. Even outside of the home, some people will think that you're purposely, because they don't understand it's actually a symptom of the disease that's preventing you to think that way. So I think there's a lot to be said for that part, and there's not a lot of medications and or therapies that treat that component of the disease. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's take a couple more comments before we go back to the web and the phone. So, yeah, we'll go here and then we'll. Okay. So one very important symptom that people or even doctors know very few. Well, at my time, dystonia. Some people call it cramps. Some people call it like twitching or focal dystonia or cervical dystonia or the cramps in your feet. They're not cramps. They're dystonia. Dystonia, it's a disease by itself, and it also comes with some cases in Parkinson's. That's my case. It was my first symptom, and when I showed up, the doctors didn't know what was going on. I had to take a photo of my foot and show it to the doctor to see what was going on. So one of the most important symptoms is dystonia, and September is Dystonia Awareness Month. Oh, okay, good to know. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing that. Looks like to add another symptom to the others on number I, one of the symptoms that bothers me most is blood pressure drop, so hypertension. It doesn't necessarily happen when I first stand up, but if I've been standing still for a while, my blood pressure will drop, and I feel like the center of my head is very cold and that I'm going to die. It doesn't make me dizzy. It's not predictable. As other people were saying, it's one of the hardest things for me to manage, not knowing when it's going to happen. And so just to add that to the list of other things that can happen with Parkinson's. Okay, thank you. Blood pressure drops. Do others also experience that, the blood pressure drops? Okay, I see several hands raised there. Okay, great. Thank you. So so we have 2 callers on the phone, okay? Operator, could we have caller number 1, please?
Yes, Sophie, your line is open.
Yes? Hello? Okay. Okay, we can go to the next caller then. Caller 2?
Thank you, sir. My name is Vicki Perry. I've had Parkinson's for over 30 years, and my first diagnosis, they had a hard time diagnosing it, and all I was supposed to go for research, and I kind of questioned that because I felt that the quality of the patient's life should also be taken into consideration. And so now that is, and I'm so happy to see that. I think there's a lot of good things that happen that was diagnosed. As far as doctors are now looking more at the quality of life of the whole person and trying to improve that. I have a genetic form of Parkinson's. I have a sister with it. That I diagnosed when I was just short of graduating from house. It was breaking. I had no idea what the disease was. I didn't know anything about it. But I was taken care of by good doctors, and eventually I took a little more as time went by. And so, like I said, people started looking more at the quality of life of the patient instead of saying, oh, this is like a good lot of money, in 5 years we'll have a cure. And of course, 30 years later, it never happened. But then after, really focusing on the patient, and I think that's a very good thing. And the different kinds of Parkinson's, the genetic form that I have is more lateral than it is like idiopathic Parkinson's. And what that means is my symptoms don't really appear clearly as most people's. But mine is more working on the inside, it goes from like through my inner body up. So now I'm at the point that I'm having difficulty remembering words. I had a lot of cognitive problems. There's a lot of autonomic systems that become involved. I have heavy sweat for no reason. I have difficulty swallowing and difficulty remembering words. But I think my neurologist is very helpful, and they're trying to stay on everything. There's the point where I was actually put in the hospital a couple times into a coma because I had too much stress in my system, and that's kind of a scary thing to go through. And that's when I got my DBS, and I had to fight for that. And then I found out I had this Parkinson's disease. And now I think we have a lot to be hopeful for. It's not all that there's not to look at the whole patient, I believe now, instead of just as this something to cure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts. So it looks like we touched upon most of these symptoms that are highlighted here, and other symptoms that you mentioned included problems with sexual intimacy. We heard low blood pressure. We heard head drop. We heard sweats on the phone, dystonia. So thank you for bringing up all of these really